Hello, hello, and welcome back to Toast. As I promised last week, I'm going to stick to some Latin American countries. So let's go straight to Chile. Now, before I start, Chile is an amazing country. There's so much to offer. It's shaped like a chili pepper on the side of South America. It's got literally like desert, mountains, all kinds of ecosystems. It's also one of the more expensive countries in South America. So if you're planning to visit it, be mindful of about that. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite parts of my entire South America trip. It is called the Carretera Austral. Now, what that means is literally Southern Highway. Now, this Southern Highway is really famous for just its views, like just driving that highway. Now, if you've been following my podcast, you know that I probably didn't have the budget for that. So I wasn't renting a car. I wasn't going to go out and dished out the cash that was required for me to drive it myself. And I also didn't have a travel partner at that moment because my girlfriend at the time had already left. So I was back to my solo travels. And what better way to do it than with the good old means of transportation, which is one or two thumbs up. I always have fun with hitchhiking. I don't think I mentioned this in my other hitchhiking episodes, but I like dance by the side of the road and I'll be like, yeah, or like thumbs up to them. And I kind of I have fun with it. It helps kill time and maybe it helps people stop. I'm not really sure. But typically, there's a lot of nice people out there. What's good to know is that in the Carretera Austral, it is like a very famous place for people to hitchhike. Apparently, in like the high season, which is not when I was there, of course, it was just like polluted with people, like just hitchhiking, and more travelers go because travel gets cheaper and cheaper, and more people hear stories like this that make them feel confident and willing to do it. It is kind of interesting to see what happens on that road. Anyways, let me just like get into the entire story. So this story actually starts in Argentina. So I took a 24-hour bus from Buenos Aires to San Carlos de Bariloche, mostly known as Bariloche, just this like kind of Swiss-looking town. They're known for their chocolate and their cheese and European architecture, as many places in Argentina are known for that because of the mass emigration of people after the Second World War, and First and Second World War. Now, I left Bariloche and I was trying to hitchhike, and it took me a really long time. And I kind of mentioned this in my past episodes. So actually, what happens is at some point I get picked up, and I just keep getting like good rides after that first like hour, 2 hour wait in the rain that I had to endure at the beginning. Everything kind of was going according to plan, and I was racing to cross the border on time because borders close at like 8 o'clock or something. And luckily, I found some like two Chilean ladies who picked me up right at the end. I was kind of just walking to the border. I thought I was maybe just going to camp nearby or camp at the border and cross. And I was really ready to do that. There's that resilience in me, I guess, when I'm solo traveling and I don't need to worry about other people's feelings or like what they might, the luxuries that they may enjoy, things like that. I kind of just say like, whatever, I'll slum it. Like nobody needs to smell me but me. And the guys who picked me up or girls who picked me up. But it was really nice. I ended up getting a lift, and I didn't realize that I should have like slept in Argentina because it was way cheaper. Their money was going through this big devaluation process. So every foreigner was richer than they should have been at the time. And Chile was not going through that. So as soon as I crossed the border, and they were getting way worse weather than on the other side, because it's really a mountain range that separates the two at that moment. Anyways, I get to this great place called Fu. If that's not a great name, then I don't know what is. Essentially, I get to Fu, and everybody's talking about this like rafting, but sometimes you need to wait a few days for there to be enough people to go rafting, and I wasn't really down with that. And I was kind of like looking for a cheap place to stay, but there was nothing below like, I don't know, $20, let's say, which is kind of expensive. Not super expensive, but it's a little bit expensive when you're backpacking and you're in South America and you're used to paying like $7 and getting breakfast included or something. Needless to say, I caved. I found a few foreigners who were traveling around, and they told me like, go to this lady. She makes her own jam. And if there's anything you should know about people who live in the mountains, they have the best jam. Why do they have the best jam? Because berries grow in mountains and they're home making the jam anyways. They don't fucking buy that shit. No, they just go outside in the mountains, they pick some berries, and they make some jam. So she fed me like an amazing breakfast. I was the only person in that like hotel for that night, so it was like a weird experience, like still being in like isolation and separated from humanity. But essentially, I got back on the road, and that's when like Carretera Austral story really begins. I leave Futalofu in the morning, and took me a while, but I was just like walking down the road, and people would pick me up and drive me a little bit further. Wasn't getting any good rides until at some point I just caved. There was a bus that was passing by, and I paid $1, and the bus brings you basically to the intersection, which is now the actual Southern Highway. And there's a lot of people who got off that bus. And it was kind of like an issue because a lot of people were just trying to hitchhike because they didn't have cars and there were no buses that go down that highway except on specific days of the week. Now, if you're not in that on that specific day of the week, that means you need to wait 2 or 3 days for the bus to come, and nobody wants to do that. So even like 45-year-olds, like there were like there was a 65-year-old couple that was just there like with their thumbs out, and we were kind of all waiting, and eventually one of us gets picked up. I got picked up, and on the road, and it was just spectacular. I'm talking about any of you who've gone through these mountain drives, whether there's like the Rocky Mountains in the States or Canada or in the Alps, you just know that like every single corner that you take, it's just like what's hidden behind this mountain, and boom, it's like 30 new mountains, all snow-capped peaks, and you're like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I want to go up there. Can I climb the mountain without dying? And they say no. Essentially, it's just like a great moment once I finally started getting rides on that thing. And actually, I was getting to this place called Puyuhuapi. They have really cool names in Chile, especially in that southern region. This is really where Patagonia starts, right? That like southern mountain chain that has like really jagged peaks and crazy things like that, which I've preached about in many episodes. And so you really start seeing Patagonia, and they have like a lot of like natives who lived there before they were massacred, of course, by the Spanish, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to get into it. So they have a lot of those like original native names for some of the towns, like Futalaufu and Puyuhuapi and Coyhaique, all these crazy places. Really, really nice place. And when I got my last lift of that day, and I'm kind of just like, oh yeah, at least like if this guy drives me to that Puyuhuapi, which he did, he was from Puyuhuapi, so he also told me like where I could stay the cheapest. I ended up camping out, but on the way, this guy was really cool. He was like, hey man, have you ever heard of nalca? And I'm like, what the fuck is nalca? And what nalca is rhubarb, for those of you who know what rhubarb is. And it grows everywhere in Patagonia on the sides of the roads. And so he was like, well, look at these guys over here. And he points at two people with this massive truck full of like this spiky plant. And I'm like, wait, what? This grows on the side of the road? Like I could have been snacking this whole time on this thing I just didn't know existed. So I felt like kind of ashamed because I like foraging a little bit. And he's like, yeah. And he just pulls over right then and there, takes a knife out, and I take my knife out, and we each cut a nalca out, and it has this like really like spiny, the rhubarb, sorry, has this really spiny out exterior, so you kind of need to skin it, and it's like this little tube, but not little, it's actually really long. I don't know, probably like 2 or 3 feet, and depending how big of one you get, and you just like you kind of skin it and just eat it like that, and it's very chewy, very very fibrous, and sour but sweet. It's like sweet and sour and fibrous. I don't know. It's really like filling and healthy at the same time. So I felt really good about it. We cut a bunch of nalca, and I just went to the campsite, and Puyuhuapi is just like this place that kind of looks like it's lakefront, but actually that's just like this massive bay that actually branches out from the sea like hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away. So like sometimes they have these like rising sea levels. So depending when you're there, you can get like a very different view of the spot. Anyways, I ended up just camping out, and it was cool. There was this one couple at my campsite, so we were kind of on the same wavelengths of what we wanted to do there, which was the Hanging Glacier. Now, I forgot the exact name of that glacier. I'm sorry about that. But in the morning, we were both, trying to set out to go to this glacier. So we had a good conversation, and just really old ovens that you see in Chile and in Patagonia, like ovens that you just like feed them the fire, and they just burn all night. And that's how you cook and boil your water. You just put it on top of this, actual oven. But not like it's a wood fire oven, but it's not like the Italian ones, the stone ones. It's still metallic and stuff. So it's like semi-modern. It's the halfway between that old classic pizza oven and what we have right now. And it was really cool to just like see that and try to warm up before bed and just really stock up on whatever it was that we were going to need for the next day. And yeah, it was really interesting to talk to them. And anyways, we slept outside, and I didn't have a mat between me and the floor, and it was Patagonia, probably like I think it was -2 that night, and I had a really good sleeping bag, but no sleeping bag is gonna protect you from the cold floor below you. You really just need that 1 inch of space, really, like just 2 centimeters is enough for you to not freeze your butt off at night. But I didn't have it, so instead I had a horrible night. I didn't sleep. It was cold. It was windy. I thought I had the best spot for my tent, and I did, and it still, just wasn't enough. I ended up putting all my clothes on the floor under me to try and like lift me up a little bit, but nothing was working. Once I was cold, there was no, warming up in that tent. Anyways, I ended up leaving really early in the morning, and I caught a ride who actually charged me. He was like, "Hey, I'll charge you, but it'll be less than the bus, and you'll get to go now." So it was kind of a weird, douchey move, but I respect it at the same time. And he dropped me off, at like the national park like entrance, which is where you go to see this like hanging glacier. Now, hanging glacier, like what does that mean, right? So I didn't really know either, and I'm not really one to Google areas before I go. So I just like put things on the map, and I just kind of decide to go to whichever ones fall in my path as I start traveling. And this happened to be there. And so I'm like running through this like national park, just trying to do as much as I can because I want to see this hanging glacier, but I also want to get back to the road. I have some hitchhiking to do, right? And so I end up like running up to the top, and like I go to like one viewpoint, take some pictures, but it was really foggy, and you know how it is in the morning, like clouds kind of need to clear because of like the air and the difference condensation, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm talking about. Oh my God. When I got to the top and I couldn't see any glacier, and all I saw was just this waterfall falling from the mountains. And I'm just there like, dude, I know that there's a glacier above that waterfall, and that's what's making this waterfall. And so no matter how fast I ran, like I couldn't, rush nature to clear the way for me. And as you may remember in my Colombia episode, patience always pays off. So I ended up sitting there in the rain for about an hour, not really sure if I should just abandon ship or not without seeing it. And I waited there for about an hour, and it paid off because I ended up getting like a time lapse of the clouds just parting, and you see this massive glacier, and no picture will ever show you the scale of a glacier, because just like the size of everything around it are like mountains and massive other things. So it was just like one of the first glaciers I ever laid eyes on, bare, and it just like took my breath away. And meanwhile, I was taking pictures of these little like birds, and I was having a great time with all the little birds that were flying around kind of looking for food from me. And then this glacier just clears up. It was an incredible moment. Needless to say, once I got a couple pictures, I just sprinted down. I needed to start like my hitchhiking day, and I still had like multiple hours worth of road to do. I got to the bottom of the trail, and people actually picked me up. Chileans picked me up and brought me from the trailhead to the highway. And I'm so lucky that they did that. And they ended up giving me chocolate, like an arrow. I hadn't eaten an arrow in years. And they loved my story, and they really wanted to encourage my hitchhiking. So they're like, here, have some food. And they dropped me off at the highway. And literally like 5 minutes later, so I wouldn't have been able to get there on foot, like if I ran. 5 minutes later, maybe not even, a guy just pulls over and picks me up. And honestly, like the guy was so cool. He worked for Coca-Cola. He was going straight to Coyhaique, which is where I was going at that moment. And Coyhaique, I had like friends of friends that I'd met earlier in the trip, like actually parents of friends that I met earlier in the trip who were hosting me. They never even met me. And like I only met the daughter, in Mancora in Peru, like months earlier for like I think 2 nights that we were all staying in a hostel together, and just so much respect to both the guy who picked me up on the road and brought me straight to the house, that I was staying at in Coyhaique, and to the family that hosted me. I think it was 2 or 3 nights that I stayed there before, continuing my journey. And it was just such a cool like mixture of like pure adventure and like not really sure like am I gonna camp by the side of the road. And I picked up a lot of like nalca, just not really sure what was going on, just have some backup food that was gonna go bad, so I'd have to eat that first. It's a really nice moment once I finally got to Coyhaique. And for a little bit of foreshadowing, because this episode is just about to come to an end at that place in Coyhaique, but that wasn't the last time that I was going to hitchhike with that guy, that same guy who brought me to Coyhaique. So, when these travel stories don't make sense, like how can you just run into somebody, 5 days later in another city? Well, it also happens when you're hitchhiking somehow at the edge of the earth. So, I'm going to end this story at Coyhaique because the Carretera Austral is just such a long southern highway, and it has so many beautiful sights, and I have so much to say about it. So I'm going to continue this as like a 2-part series on the southern highway in Chile. Please watch the next episode because I swear to God, there's a lot that happens. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys are all being safe out there. I really appreciate you. And toast out.